For my first video, what should I teach? It's got to be something good. So many choices, so many choices. So many good choices, to be honest with you. Oh, hey, dominant species. That'd be an awesome first choice. Alright, let's learn us a game. Hey guys and gals, welcome to Across the Table. I'm Edward, EAPs on BGG or Board Game Geek. So the whole point of this video series is to help teach you guys how to play the games that you own or want to own. This isn't a review series. There's plenty of people out there that do really great reviews and that really fire up that acquisition disorder in all of us and want us to buy the games. Well, this isn't that. What this is, though, is imagine we're all together in your living or in your dining room, your game room or whatever, and we all got together to play the game. Nobody knows how to play the game except for me. So my job here is to teach you as if I were across the table from you, and that's pretty much the gist of it. So today's game is my favorite game, Dominant Species. It's designed by Chad Jensen, published by GMT Games back in 2010. There have been 3 printings or editions of the game so far, and the one you see and that we have is the 3rd edition of the game, or the fancy artwork edition. Before I go any further, let me go ahead and preface something though. Dominant Species very much is a war game dressed as a Euro. It may talk with a European accent. It may love David Hasselhoff. Hell, it may even drive a Vespa. But make no mistake, this is about as close as a Euro gets to a war game. As the player count goes up, because this is for 2 to 6 players, as you get closer to that 6-player mark, I'm not going to say the more brutal it gets, but the more war gamey feel it gets. It does have brutal aspects to it, but hopefully that's part of the charm. It is for me. Also, keep in mind that even though this is a Euro, this was designed by the guy who designed Combat Commander. So keep that in mind. That said, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, now I'm going to go over setup for the game and briefly touch on the different components in the game and that each player gets. So what you see before you on the right hand side are the 6 individual player boards. Top to bottom, in food chain order, you have mammals, reptiles, birds, amphibians, arachnids, and insects. So at the beginning of the game, every player is going to choose one of these, randomly be assigned however you want to do that. They're also going to get these action pawns. These are, I'll refer to as APs going forward. And what these are your workers for the worker placement aspect or phase of the game, if you will. In a 4-player game, you're going to start with 5 of these. Every player will start with the same amount. You also have your dominance tokens, dominance markers, whatnot. These will be placed on the terrain tiles on Earth to claim dominance of that tile. And last and certainly not least, you have your species. So let me make a clear distinction real quick. So we're looking at the green player, which is the insects here. These are the animals. The players are represented by the animals. These are the species of the animal. So think of it this way. You're the insects. This might be a cockroach. Maybe this is a praying mantis. This is a pill bug, or however you want to think of it. But species, animals, species. I hope that distinction is clear. That absolutely is important. Okay. I had mentioned tiebreaker or food chain order. Food chain order is used for tiebreakers. So if the mammals are ever in play, meaning a player chose the mammals at the beginning of the game, they're going to win all the tiebreakers. It's good to be the king. Whereas the insects, you're basically bait. So make sure if you're the insects that you're not tied in certain aspects of the game, or else you're going to lose that tiebreaker. Boards, you have different elements printed on the board. For the mammals, you start out with meat, the reptiles, sun, birds, seed, amphibians, water, arachnids get grubs, and insects, grass. So what these are these elements, as you saw over here on Earth. These indicate where your species, remember, species where these can survive. All right, so you have insects here. They can only survive on tiles that have a grass token, or I'm sorry, a grass element touching it. So in this, at the beginning of the game, insects, looking at the green cubes or species, they can survive on desert, they can survive on tundra, even though they don't start there because it's touching a grass tile. They can also survive on this savanna tile, and they can also survive in this wetland. There's no grass tiles over here, so they wouldn't be able to survive on any of those tiles. So that being said, notice these empty spots here. You're going to be able to adapt as the game goes on. You're going to be able to add element discs onto here, but you can only add up to the amount of spaces available. So the amphibians start with 3, that's their special ability. They start with 3 water tokens, but they only have 3 available spots for additional element tokens. Everyone else has the availability, or the ability, if you will, to add 4 onto their player board. Dominance cards. These are incredibly game-changing, rule-breaking, super important. I hope I'm getting across how important these are for you to get, either for offensive reasons to hurt the other players, or defensive reason to keep defensive, meaning that the other player, you want to take the cards so that the other players can't use them against you. All right. So at the beginning of the game, what you're going to do, you're going to grab 2 of these cards, which are the survival card and the Ice Age card. You're going to set them aside. You're going to take all the other cards, shuffle them face down, and then you're going to deal out 5 of them, as you see out here in the spots that are available for the cards. Then you're going to take the Ice Age card and put it face up at the bottom of the deck. These cards are also, not only are they huge, they have a huge impact on the game, these are also the timer for the game. So when the Ice Age card comes out on the board as such, and it's actually drawn by a player, that's going to trigger the end game. All right, that's going to trigger final scoring, so on and so forth. All right, so keep that in mind, that these are the timer for the game. The survival card's going to be placed off to the side, have the rest of the deck ready to go, and the cards are set up. So now let's move on over to the actual board itself. So this is how the game's going to be set up each and every game you play, unless you play one of the variants, but I'm not going to touch on those. So if you notice, you have 7 terrain tiles out here. Those are the 7 different types of terrain that are in the game. You have sea, wetland, savanna, jungle, forest, desert, and mountain. Oh, but you also have these. These are tundra tiles. Anytime a tundra tile comes out and it covers one of these tiles, like it starts on top of the sea tile at the beginning of the game, that's no longer a sea tile. That's a tundra tile. So if we add more tundra tiles on the desert, so on and so forth, that's no longer a desert. It's now tundra. Because remember, the end of the game is triggered when the Ice Age comes. So the Ice Age is coming. Be aware of that. The remaining cards, these Wanderlust tiles, not cards, I'm sorry, the rest of the tiles, they're shuffled, put into 3 equal piles of 8 tiles each. Turn the top one up of each pile, and the tiles are set up. We're almost ready. 2 last things. At the top of the initiative track, right here at the top of the board, each player has a token or a counter or a chit, however you want to call this, that represents their animal. So if there's only 3 animals in play, whatever 3, those would be the 3 up here. You set them up in reverse food chain. You randomly draw 4 to put on adaptation, 4 on abundance, and point of the game is victory points. If you notice along the outside of the board all the way around on 3 sides there's a victory point track. It goes from 0 to 100, and you are supposed to use one of the species of your starting species to use as a point tracker. We don't like that. We prefer to use one of the unused action pawns for each player. Easier to note, easier to see, and harder to bump around. All right. So since the point of the game is victory points, how do you score victory points? There are a plethora of ways, Hefe, to score points in this game, but the majority of the points are going to be coming from right here when you score domination. So obviously I haven't gotten to that, but just to let you guys know, you're going to score domination. You're going to score whoever gets this survival card at the end of the round. You're also going to have a metric ton of scoring at final game. All right, so there are a ton of different ways to score, and I'll hit on all those in just a minute. The game is broken up into multiple rounds, and within each round there are 3 phases. There's a planning phase, an execution phase, and a reset phase. Each round is going to have the exact same 3 phases, rinse and repeat until the end of the game. So the planning phase is the worker placement part of the game. Every player is going to have their action pawns, starting with the initiative track order. So the insects are going to take one of their APs and place it on any available eyeball space on the board. Then the amphibians are going to place one, then the birds, so on and so forth. Then when you get back to the insects, they'll place another, rinse and repeat until everybody has placed all their action pawns on available eyeball spaces. That'll conclude phase 1, the planning phase. Then you move into the execution phase, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to execute the things that you had planned on doing in the first phase. So what I plan on doing here is go ahead and run through real quick what each one does and show you what it does, and pretty simple, and you guys will have the game down, I think, at that point. So let's start. The initiative track, let's say the birds were to place there. They don't like going third, they want to move up. So if they had placed it on the available eyeball space, once we move into the execution phase, that execution is going to go top to bottom, left to right, the whole way down, all the way through domination, which is the last step. So starting with initiative, the birds would then be allowed to move up 1 space, and then the cool thing about the initiative track, or the initiative spot, and only the initiative spot, whoever places there then can replace their action pawn on any available open spot or any available eyeball spot that's left. So basically you're getting 2 moves for that 1 spot, and that's the only place that happens. Moving down to adaptation, the birds are gonna get a lot of actions this turn. What happens there? Adaptation. So it allows your animal to adapt so that its species can survive in more places. It's pretty simple. All you're gonna do is take one of the 4 available elements and place them onto your player board. So the birds start with 2 seeds. Maybe they want a meat, or maybe they want a grub, so that they can survive wherever that element disc is on Earth. Pretty simple. Adaptation. We're going to skip regression. Oh, and I should say, whenever that player takes that action, all they're going to do is remove the action pawn, take that disc or whatever the action is, and move on. And then you would go to the second or third if there are action pawns placed there. Regression we're going to skip for right now. We're going to move down to abundance. So abundance is exactly like adaptation, but instead of placing the element disc on your player board, you're going to place it on Earth on any open vertice. You're not allowed to replace an existing element. All you do is place it somewhere on Earth on any of the available, on any of the tiles that have been placed on any open vertice. Pretty simple. So either maybe, let's say the birds had grabbed the meat up here to place on their player board, so now maybe they add the meat onto Earth so that they can survive on a new tile. Pretty simple. Wasteland and depletion we're going to skip for now. Glaciation. Now this one, pretty important. This is the only step in which only the leftmost action pawn will be used. During the reset phase of each round, any additional action pawns that are placed here only move up 1 spot. So there's only going to be 1 glaciation taken per round. In this one, I'm actually going to move the camera and show you guys how this works. So in this example, the birds, because they have a million moves this round for some reason, the birds, you take that up, then we're going to move it over to the board here. You take one of the tundra tiles, that are up there, up here. You're going to take one of those tundra tiles, and you can then turn any adjacent to existing tundra tile into tundra. So you can place it on any of these and turn those into tundra. So let's say, again, it's the birds, they're yellow. Let's say we want to turn this one into tundra. You remove all pieces from that except for the elements, and then you place the tundra tile, so that is no longer a savanna. That is now a tundra. You place all the species that were on there with one caveat. Every animal can only have one species left on the tundra tile when you place a new one. So this removes species, and it could be that you remove 20 species from that tile. It all depends on how many are there. It's just in this case only the insects had multiple species. You take that, and the insects get to put this back into their player pool here, and it goes back in. That is the only time in the game that a species is removed from Earth in which the player can reuse it. On any other situation, unless a card or something else calls for it, any other time it's removed from the game, put back in the box, and you'll never see it again. All right, I hope that's clear. So two more things about glaciation. Now, notice that this element disk here, this grass, is surrounded by tundra tile. Immediately, you're going to take this element, since it's surrounded by the tundra tiles, and put it back in the bag. That element is now removed from the board. One other thing, when you place a tundra tile, you're going to score bonus points depending on how many existing tundra tiles it was touching. So we placed this tundra tile, it was touching 2 tundra tiles. Let's move one more time. Notice the bonus points table right here. Quantity, it was touching 2 tundra tiles, so you're in this case yellow is going to score 3 bonus points. So you would then peg yellow for 3 points, and the glaciation action is done. During the reset phase, as I mentioned, these are going to scoot up 1 spot forward. All right, so that is glaciation. So let's move on to speciation. Sticking with our bird theme, let's say the birds had placed one here on the meat element. All right, and you know, for argument's sake, let's just say it was like this, so on and so forth. All right, so again, you're executing these actions top to bottom, left to right. So in this case, the birds and the meat element, this is how you add elements, this is how you add species onto the board. This is how you get more of your pieces out on the board. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this yellow AP, because they're first, and find a meat element that we want to speciate on. So as of right now, there are only 2 meat elements on the board here. The yellow player, the birds, may select one of them. So let's say they select that one. It's best to put your action pawn on there. You don't have to, but it's easier so that everyone can see which element you're speciating from. And notice it's touching 3 tiles. It's touching a tundra tile, it's touching a mountain tile, and it's touching a forest tile. Well, you get to speciate onto all 3 of those if you want. You don't have to, and yeah, you don't have to. So how many do you get to put on? Well, a forest, mountain, and a tundra. Over here, you notice below speciation, it has every tile, and it says how many you're allowed to put on, or a maximum allowed to put on there. So we had a mountain, so you can put 0, 1, or 2 species onto that mountain. We have forest, you can put up to 3 on that, and you may also place 1 on the tundra. Early on, I would recommend not going too nuts with it, but that's up to you. Remember back when I was explaining that each animal has its own special ability. The amphibians start with an extra water tile on their player board. Well, on the board, you'll notice that every animal has a special ability placed on the board. So in this case, this is the first one we've come to. During speciation, after you've executed all the other eyeball spaces, if there were action pawns on there, every turn, the insects get to take 1 species, so that means they get 1 cube, and they can place it on any tile on Earth. Pretty cool. So that's speciation. So let's move on down now. Let me fix this. There we go. let's move on down now to Wanderlust. This is how you build the board. Sticking with our theme here of the birds taking every single action in the game, during Wanderlust, again left to right, the birds would then get to choose their choice of any of the face-up tiles that are out there. So there are 3 eyeball spaces on Wanderlust. If all 3 are taken, whoever chooses the first 2, obviously the third player would only have 1 tile left to choose from, so it's good to go first. I've never seen a reason to not take the highest value tile. The highest value tile is always going to be sea, wetland, savanna, on down. And here's the point scoring in the order from most lucrative to least. Use that, and there's no reason not to take the highest value tile. So on the Wanderlust action, yellow in this case would then take the sea tile, and they can place it on any adjacent spot. So they could place it on any of these spots out here that's touching an existing tile. So the birds, they already have a seed element because that's on their board. Let's say they place it right here. In addition to placing the tile, the birds then can choose to place any of these elements on that tile that they just placed. They do not have to place an element, because let's say it were like this and the birds only had seed on their player board. Well, they're only helping their enemies, they're not helping themselves, so they wouldn't want to do that. But in this case, it just so happens that there is a seed element there, so the birds choose to take that seed element and they can place it on any open vertice on that sea tile. Well, since they already have dominance on this, why not make this one stronger? They place it there. Cool, good deal. Now, on Wanderlust, now that that's done, keep in mind they place the tile. Just like the Tundra tiles, they get to score bonus points. So using that bonus point track right here, it was touching 2 existing tiles. So it was touching the forest and the mountain. So therefore, the birds would score an additional 3 points. They're racking up the points here. So they would peg the 3 points, and then we get to go into the last part of the Wanderlust phase. And that's a free migration for folks. And this is important. It's in food chain order here for all adjacent tiles. So we place the sea tile here. So that means any existing species in the forest and the mountain may choose, don't have to, from 0 up to the max amount that they have in those 2 tiles, they may move into that sea tile. So the mammals are in this game. They're the white cubes. They're the white species there. They get first choice. Well, if the mammals, they could move 1 there, they could move all those, they could move anything they want to do like that, okay? But here's the catch. Remember, if the mammals don't have seed tile or seed elements on their player board, they may not want to go there, because odds are during the reset phase they're going to go extinct, so those species will die. So maybe the mammals choose not to move. So then, next in food chain order, over here on the left, looking at that, the reptiles are next. So that's the black species. So they decide, nah, you know what, we can't survive there either, we choose not to go there. Alright, now it finally gets to the birds. Even though they're the ones that place the tile, they're third in food chain order. And since mammals and reptiles are both on those tiles, they go third. The birds are like, heck yeah, it's worth 9 points if it gets scored. I'll move in, but they want to keep it, they choose to keep a presence in both of those tiles. So they moved in, they're the only ones there, and they have dominance because they have those seeds. They now get a dominance marker. And that, folks, is Wanderlust. Moving down now to migration, all right? So migration is exactly what you think it is. It's moving, all right? There are a couple of caveats to this, which I will point out. And it's good that we're using our friends the birds here, because notice the birds have their special ability. They get to move 2 spaces as opposed to everybody else's 1. So we activate these left to right. So you would ask yourself, why would I want to go to the 2 when there's a possible, 6 there? Well, it executes left to right, so strategically you may want to see where everyone else moves first before you act. So it's something to think about on that. So let's say the birds are going to migrate, let's say the birds are only going to migrate 4. There's nobody else migrating. So we take the action pawn. We move it on back to the board. All right, so what that means is because the birds chose to move 4, they can move 4 individual cubes. You are not allowed to move the same cube twice. So the birds are allowed to move 2. Indulge me, and let's say instead we're doing the insects. They had the action, not the birds. So the insects, they chose 4 as well. Well, we could not move this insect species 1, 2. Even though that's only 2, that's moving the same species twice. You're not allowed to move that. So you could do 1, you could do 2, you could do 3, even though the insects probably can't live there right now. But you get the idea. You don't have to take all 4, or however many that you chose. That's just the maximum. But we actually chose to move the birds. So the bird's special ability is instead of moving just 1, they can move 2. So that's 1 movement for the birds, 1, 2 spots. That's 1 of their 4. And let's say they go 1. That's 2 of their 4, so on and so forth. But notice if the birds vacate here, they can't be dominant anymore. Why? Because they don't have a presence, even though they would be dominant because they have seed on their player board, and their dominance would be upwards of 6+. All right, hope that's clear. Moving back. 2 steps left. Competition. Notice the spider here. Spiders like to eat. So the spider can kill any 1 species on a tile in which it currently exists. So we didn't have the spiders in play, but let's say we do now. Let's move on back. And notice that the spider was first before any other actions. Unlike, say, the insects in speciation, they get to add 1 species last. In this case, the spiders get to kill 1 species first. So the spiders normally are red, and notice that they're here and also on the tundra tile. Nowhere else on Earth could they kill a species. They can't kill this mammal here, they can't kill this bird because they're not on that tile. But they are on these. So they get to choose, do I want to kill either the amphibian, or do I want to kill the insect, or here, do I want to kill the insect off the tundra? Well, looking at this jungle tile, if it's scored, scores 6, 3, and 2 points respectively. So he's looking at that and he's like, the amphibians are higher on the food chain than I am, which are these, and the insects are below me. So why not kill that amphibian? Now, if this tile were to get scored, I would score the 6 points and the insects would score the 3. This removed species goes out of the game forever, never to be seen. It becomes, I guess, spider scat. So that's the spider's special ability. Following in line with our birds, let's say the birds had placed it there on that eyeball space. Well, you'll notice in competition, each eyeball space is touching 3 different types of terrain, of terrain. So if the birds were to place it here, that means they get to kill 1 species, provided they're in a mountain, 1 species, provided they're in a sea, and also everything touches tundra. So in this case, our bird can kill 1 mountain, 1 sea, and 1 tundra species. Let's move on back. Oh, would you look there? This is the only sea tile on Earth, and no one else is here. So that one's wasted. Let's go over to the mountain. Ah, there's 2 mammals, and there's a reptile there. Well, we know we're going to lose the tiebreaker if this were scored, because the mammals are higher up the food chain than we are. So, why not kill that spider, or that reptile here, because they're higher than us on the food chain, and at least we'll get the 2 points if it's scored. So the birds eat the reptile. This goes out of the game, never to be seen again. And then the birds are also on this tundra tile here. Same idea, but keep in mind, tundra only scores 1 point if it's scored, so it doesn't matter who they kill. Oh, actually, I take that back. They can kill the reptile and be highest and score that point. So the reptile's getting picked on this round. And that is competition. Last but not least, and certainly the most important, in my opinion, is domination. Most rounds, all 5 of these spots are going to be taken. This is where you're going to score the majority of the points, and most importantly, this is where you get the cards, all right? So, sticking with our bird theme, apparently I was a parrot in another life. The domination, again, left to right. So, yellow then takes their AP, and while it's not called out in the rules to do this, I would highly recommend doing this. Coming back, whoever turn it is, so it's the birds, they're in the first eyeball space, takes their AP and places it on the tile they would like to score, all right? Only one tile, each tile can only be scored once per round. That's why we place the action pawns on there, to signify that tile has already been scored. All right, so I'm going to give 2 examples here. So in this case, the birds are the only ones there. They score, and you can see it on the tile itself or over here on the bonus scoring. Okay, so the C tile scores 9 for first place, 5 for second, 3, and then 2 for fourth. All right, but our birds are all alone, the seagulls. So they score 9 points. So you would peg 9 points for yellow, and cool, good to go. But the cone of power, dominance. So now let's move over to the cards, and I'm going to quickly run through the cards here and explain this is just so happens which 5 that we drew out at random, all right? And this is going to be reseeded every round. So here we have a blight card, and that says select a tile, remove all but one element from that tile. Just to get, on second thought, I'm not going to run through them all. I'll just give you an idea. So, let's say we chose that mountain tile. All right, select a tile, remove all but one element from that tile. Cards always are executed immediately. You cannot save them. If something on it doesn't apply, you can't do it. It just gets drawn and discarded. So, cards are always executed immediately. So this card, again, let's say we choose this mountain tile. Well, we're birds. We have seeds. That one goes away. That one goes away. That one goes away. All of a sudden, nobody can survive there except for the birds. So these go back into the bag, and that is the dominance for the birds. But let's say, for whatever reason, we chose to score the mountain tile instead, all right? And those elements are still on there. So if we're scoring this one, and I can't imagine why we would, but just in case you guys were wondering, the mammals have tiebreaker. So the mammals would score the 3 points, the birds would score 2. And even though it was the birds' action who took the it's their AP, and they took the action, the mammals would score the more points, and the mammals would get the card. And that would be really, really poor. So it would behoove the birds to have chosen the C tile as they did originally. And that's pretty much the execution phase. Hopefully that's clear. So now that the execution phase is done, we're going to move into the reset phase. All right. Notice, reset phase, first step is extinction. But you see the monkey here, the mammals. They get to save one mammal on Earth. Moving on back over here, let me show you the mammal card. The mammals only currently have meat on there. It's the first round, so they haven't been able to add any additional elements. So they only have meat elements. The birds were really mean, and they had scored that, or let's say they scored this tile, but they chose blight, remember, and it wiped out all the elements here. So now comes extinction. If there are tiles, let me back up. If there are species on tiles in which there are no elements that match what's on your player board, your species go extinct. They die, they go away, never to be seen again. So in this case, normally these two mammals would die because there's no meat element touching anywhere on that tile. However, their special ability is they get to save one mammal. So here, one of these would go away, and they could choose to save that one because everyone else, oh, well, you know what? I misspoke. These would die as well, and that one would die as well because there's no meat touching any of these. So all of these die. So maybe they choose to save that one instead of that one. But this goes away, replaced with that. There's no mammals left there. Now here, notice something important, and this is something I failed to mention earlier. Once if an animal is going extinct, or if an animal cannot exist there, so in this case the mammal, because there's no meat elements here, even though he's the only one in that space, he cannot be dominant. All right, so there is no white cone on here because he doesn't have dominance, because he doesn't have a matching element. Even though the mammal's special ability allows him to survive, he does not get dominance there. Keep that in mind. So that's extinction. You would wipe out, and normally what we do is everybody is accountable for their own animal. So the arachnids look at all the arachnid species on the board. Hey, can I survive there? And it's just an integrity thing, but let's face it, if we're playing board games together, you would think that everybody has that, so it's nothing to be worried about. All right? So that's extinction. Now, survival. Remember this card we set aside about 6 hours ago? Well, now this card comes into play. And what the survival card says is give this card to the player with the most species occupying tundra tiles. We'll get to the second part in a minute. Tundra tiles. All right, so now we're just counting the total number of species on there. So it looks like the reptiles have 2, the insects have 2, and the others only have 1. So in this case, there is no tiebreak. Okay, this is one of the only times in which there is no tiebreaker. All right, if the top 2 are tied, or top 3 or whatever, no one gets the survival card. This just stays set aside, and there's no bonus scoring for them. All right. However, let's say it's like that. Now the reptiles have 3 out there, and the closest one is the insects, and they only have 2. All right, so we've established now that the reptiles have more species, so they get this survival card. So let's look at what the bottom says. It says, during the reset phase, gain bonus victory points for the number of tundra tiles you occupy. All right, simple enough. The reptiles are on this tundra tile, and they're on that tundra tile. 2. Look at our bonus points table. They're on 2. They score 3 points. So black pegs 3 points on their score. Something to keep in mind, late in the game, it's possible to have 7, 8, 9, 10 tundra tiles out there. Whoever has the most species on those tundra tiles potentially could score some ridiculous points. All right, 21 for 6 if they're on that many different tundra tiles, 36 for 8, and as many as 45 points. Huge, huge impact in the game. So it's something to keep an eye on. All right? All right. So we're almost done with the reset phase. We've done extinction. We've done survival. Now we have to reseed. What does that mean? All right. Well, we see that there was only one Wanderlust action taken. So what do? It would normally look like this. So, and those 2 would stay there. You would then flip the next one up. We have to drop everything that's left in adaptation to regression, but for argument's sake, let's say it's just those 2. These 2 got taken during adaptation. In abundance, let's say that one drops, but imagine this wasn't the first round, so maybe this is the second round going to the third round, and there was already a water element here. Let's say that one drops down. These get reset. You would then draw 4 new elements and place them out onto the adaptation. You would then place 4 new ones on abundance. And anything left on Wanderlust here gets wiped off, and you put out 4 new ones there. Also, however many cards are left out there, stay out there, and then you would just draw new ones to fill the empty spot. So you can see in this case, because the cards are the timer for the game, if people aren't taking domination actions, so in our example only 1 took it, that's going to be a very, very long game. Because again, the game doesn't end until you get the Ice Age card at the very end. So you would have to go through all those cards. So it's important, domination, not only for scoring, but also to speed up the pace of the game. All right? Last thing. Remember, back when I was running through the planning phase, I skipped regression, wasteland, and depletion. That's because nothing was in those boxes. But at this point, now there is. We're into the second or say third round, and these have dropped down into the regression box. What is regression? Well, for each element type, so there's a sun and there's a grub in here, every animal removes 1 of those from the animal display, from your player board. All right, so what that means is, let's say, using our birds, right? Let's say our birds, they start out with 2 seeds on their player board, like so. But let's say they also had a sun and they had a grub out here. They would then lose both of those elements off their board back into the bag to where all they have left are the 2 seeds. So that would be really, really bad for them. Because then maybe they have species that are only touching, that have elements, only these elements. Now they're going to die when we get to the extinction phase. But let's say the birds had a little foresight and they decided, you know what, I really want to keep those elements on my board. For each action pawn on here, they get to negate 1 of these. So now the birds don't have to lose a sun and they don't have to lose any grubs. Hope that makes sense. Now notice the reptiles are here. They get 1 free. Think of it as the reptiles have an action pawn there permanently. And that's their bonus. So they can survive, they can keep, if they'd gotten a grub on their grub element on their player board, they're good to go. All right? Moving down, let's look at Wasteland. Now this is where these have to do with player board, these 3 have to do with Earth. The birds can then choose to make sure nothing happens. They can take this element and put it back in the bag, nothing happens. But let's say nobody goes there. If nobody goes there, we then have to look at the board, and that's a grass element that's on there. Any grass touching tundra, so anything around here, and there happens to only be 1, but let's say there were 2, those go away, back into the bag. So now, again, you have to worry about extinction in that case. And that's only if no one goes to Wasteland. Now, let's say the birds went there. They don't have grass on their player board, so they don't care if it goes away or not. But they want to hurt the amphibians. They can go there to block and let it happen. So they're going there to make sure that other animals can't go there. And now they force that grass to disappear, touching all tundra tiles. Kind of nasty. Last, certainly not least, we have depletion. If no one goes here, nothing happens. Okay, this would, at the end of the round during the reset phase, this just goes back into the board, nothing happens. But those pesky birds, man, they're not nice. Let's say they go there. What happens? Well, there's a water element. Or let's say there was a water and a grass element. They can choose either of those, either a water or a grass, if it were in there. And they can choose to remove any element of that type from Earth, touching tundra or not. Let's say they say, let's get rid of that one. That goes back into the bag, never to be seen again. And so potentially whatever was there may end up going extinct at the end of the round. And that's it. That's how the game works. So you rinse, repeat, so on and so forth, until the Ice Age card comes out. Now, let's say the Ice Age card is out here, okay? Ends up, we hit the final round, or what we think will be the final round, and we bring that Ice Age card out. Well, nothing happens until someone actually takes a domination action and draws that card. So here we've come to what we think will be the final round. And our friends the birds are first up on the domination. All right, we've already executed the rest of everything. So here, the birds choose to go ahead and score that C tile. So if we look here, the birds have 3, the amphibians have 2, the reptiles have 1, so it's pretty straightforward scoring. The birds will score 9, the amphibians 5, and the reptiles 3 points. But they also have dominance, so they get to choose any of the 5 cards, and let's say they choose the Ice Age card. So what does this say? It says each animal scores bonus victory points based on the total number of tiles it currently dominates. This is the last turn. So what this means is we're going to score dominance for every single tile that has a dominance marker out there, but we are going to finish the scoring for each of these APs as well. We're also going to do extinction, we're going to do survival, and then we're going to do one final scoring of each tile. All right, so I'll run you through this real quick. So let's figure out, and I'm not going to do this for everyone, just enough to give you the idea. We have to score bonus victory points for each each dominance. So let's take the birds. The birds currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cones out there for dominance. If we take a look at the bonus point scoring, 5, it's 15 points, so yellow would peg for 15. Then let's say we decide to do the reptiles, which are black. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that looks like it. Come back. 4, that's 10 points. Rinse and repeat for every single player who has a dominance cone out there. And you know what? I totally messed that up. There we go. So there can only be one dominance cone, obviously, so my bad on that. All right, so then the Ice Age is scored for every player, and that's discarded just like every other card. Then we would go through, say the reptiles score 1 tile, the mammals score 1, the birds score another, and then the insects score 1 last one. Then we do extinction. So just like normal, we would go through extinction, then we would go through survival. And again, survival is scoring the tundra tiles based on whoever has the most species out there. So let's look. And if we look real quick, it's pretty obvious to us that the amphibians happen to have the most species on tundra tiles. I mean, we have 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 out there. Nobody else is going to touch that. So they get the survival card. So then they get to score based on how many actual tundra tiles they're on. Well, through really good manipulation of migration and speciation on the final round, they were actually able to get out onto all 8 tundra tiles. That's going to be a, well, I'll keep it fan friendly. That's a whole lot of points. So if you look, they're on 8 different tundra tiles. They then score 36 points, which is a ridiculously high number of points. So what happens now? Now we do final scoring. You can go ahead and remove all the dominance markers off of every tile. All they're going to do is clutter the board. So you clear them all off. Then every single tile gets scored based on population. The insects score 3, the reptiles score 2. The reptiles score 8, the insects score 4. The reptiles score 7, the amphibians score 4. Let's see, ties, the mammals then would score 8 here. The reptiles would score 4. The insects would score 2 because even though they're lower on the food chain than the birds only have 1 cube there, and the birds would score 1. Do that for every single tile, and there's your final scoring. So whoever has the highest score at the end of that, congrats. You are now the dominant animal in dominant species. And that's about it, guys. So I realize it ran a little long, and I apologize. It's my first video, but hopefully you found it useful, helpful, and hopefully I put more money in Chad Jensen's pocket by getting more people wanting to buy the game. It's my favorite game, and thanks for joining me on Across the Table. Guys, through how to play the game, I wanted to touch on some tips and tricks or whatever that we found playing the game that might help you guys in saving time and bookkeeping and such. So first off, the game calls out to use the species here as point markers. We choose to use the unused APs as they're easier to see, and at a glance people can see where everyone is on the scoring track. That's what we choose to do. Also, if you notice out here on the board, I've placed dominance markers for all the special abilities for all 5 of the animals that have special abilities. The 6th one is the amphibians, which get the extra element on their player board. But here we put the cones on here, and we put them on at the beginning of the game to signify as a reminder, hey, don't forget that this animal gets to do this. Too many times we've gone through a round and been like, oh man, I forgot I got an extra speciation, or oh shoot, I got to kill something, whatever. We put those out there in the whatever color player that matches the animal, and we found that has helped immensely on not forgetting that. Also, over here on the initiative track, all of these are two-sided. One has the suggested color, the other it's all white. So if you don't want the mammals to be white and you want the amphibians to be white or red or blue or whatever, you can do that. So don't forget about that. Let's see, also, don't forget, I had mentioned that whenever you place dominance mark, or whenever you take a dominance action here, whenever you take a dominance action, take the AP and leave it on that tile that is scored. That way people don't accidentally try and score the same tile twice. We've had that happen numerous times. Also, and this is a biggie, whenever you put new cards out at the beginning of every round, whoever puts them out, read them out loud to the table. That way everyone is aware of what dominance cards are available that round. Too many times I've seen too many hard feelings like, oh man, I didn't know you were going to wipe out half of my population. I didn't know that card came out. If I had, maybe I would have tried to get one of the early domination eyeball spots so that, you know, I could take that card to keep you from hurting me so bad. Or whatever. Just something real simple that'll save a whole lot of bad feelings and frustration for players as well. Also, speaking of scoring and whatnot, early scoring is not that important. I've been 30, 40 points behind first place, you know, at the midway point of the game, and come back to win in a landslide just because I was able to score really well on the survival cards, or maybe I did really well when the Ice Age came, or however. So early scoring, not that big of a deal. The endgame scoring is, I cannot stress how big and how swingy that can be. So make sure you're poised really well for endgame scoring, and if you've fallen behind early, it's really not a big deal. Last but not least, speciation. That means, remember, bringing out new species onto the board. Don't overdo it early, and at the same time, I've seen people have 1 or no species left on the board at the end of a round. It happens, it's not that big a deal unless you lose all your species early. Remember, you have a finite amount, so however many you start with, that's all you have for the entire game, and you want them to be there come the end of the game, so just be aware of that. Alright? Oh, one last thing. There is a extremely useful file on Board Game Geek in the file section for dominant species. I believe the guy's name was Russ E1G or something like that. And basically what this is here is a more thorough explanation of every step and every one that's out here. And if you print off 1 per player, that's going to save you a whole lot of rule book flipping as well. Hopefully there's not going to be too much of that, and hopefully I covered most everything. But that's about it. Enjoy the game, guys, and thanks for watching.